buddy Jolt here from the Token Minorities, and I am bringing you the NPL Season 4 Championship Game Team Builder video. So before I proceed through this, I do want to say if you happen to miss the semifinals match against Cheeseboy628 in the Phoenix Sun Current, which happened I guess 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point, definitely check that out. It will be a link in the description below, and of course it'd be kind of cool to see how that game went before looking at this championship game. So now moving into the actual battle. My opponent here is Trev, coach of the Atlanta Braviarys. Now, an interesting side story that I think deserves mentioning because he played Togavor and the Portland Timbers in the semifinals on the other side of the bracket, and in all honesty, Toj should have won that game. It was a very ridiculous ending to the game that ended up with Trev coming out on top. So full credit to Trev, of course, for making the finals, but I do want to give a shout out to Togavor before going any further here, as I honestly think I should be playing Togavor in this game, but regardless, we're focusing on Trev here. So his team: Escadrille, Heliolisk, Reuniclus, Excelgor, Greninja, Seismitoad, Blissey, Hoopa Unbound, Venusaur, Blaziken, and Mega Charizard Y. So his team is kind of a pseudo Sun team, I guess, with Mega Charizard Y, Blaziken, and Venusaur, and Heliolisk, of course, can also benefit from the Sun, so that's kind of a cool little perk to his team. But just overall, I don't know, I guess I'm not personally that impressed with the synergy of his team. Yeah, it has that pseudo Sun core per se, but it just feels like a bunch of pieces that shouldn't really work together very well. So like personally, I'm kind of surprised to see him in the finals here with this team, and I think he's kind of surprised by it as well, and for good reason, honestly. But he's here, and it's with this team. Now, I will say before going any further that Trev is the embodiment of someone who is both good at the game and insanely lucky, and that is something that is very complicated to prepare for, despite the fact that my team is essentially built to prevent getting hacked, or drafted to prevent getting hacked out. Almost all my Pokemon depend on moves that have nearly 100% accuracy, and that was the whole idea behind my draft in the first place. So regardless of that fact, I have to prepare so carefully to the point where I can overcome essentially any sort of hacks that may happen against me, and that is something that I will be keeping in mind and will be obviously building my team around for this championship game, as Trev is just a very lucky player. There's nothing we can really do about that, and nothing he can do about that. That's just something that I have to deal with. So looking at some of the bigger threats on his team, Mega Charizard Y is actually an enormous threat to my entire roster, as in standard OU, Latios is a good switch into Mega Charizard Y, but in draft format this isn't really the case, as Mega Charizard Y can easily run Dragon Pulse, for example, or it can be a physical set with Dragon Dance and Outrage, as despite it being the more potent special attacker of the two Charizard Mega forms, it still can be a very, very strong Dragon Dance user, especially with Flare Blitz being boosted by its Drought ability. So I really don't have a good answer to Mega Charizard Y. I don't have a counter to Mega Charizard Y at all. So I'm going to have to either beat it offensively with overpressuring it, or with a lure, and I will show you what I have planned for that here in a little bit. So Mega Charizard Y, big threat, and coupling with that is Venusaur, which is also a big threat, as if you take away Venusaur and Mega Charizard Y, look at his team and tell me what he has for Breloom. He has nothing left for Breloom except this Venusaur and Mega Charizard Y combo. So if he brings both of those, then of course Breloom's going to have a harder time, and if he decides to not bring either of them, Breloom becomes the enormous win condition immediately. And even so, even if he does bring both of those, I would anticipate that they both would be offensive against my team, and that would make Breloom still a pretty solid offensive option against his team. But other threats, he's got Hoopa Unbound. Now this is something that I encountered a couple times, or at least once, like on the Colorado Avalugs earlier in the season, and I had a hard time dealing with that as well, in that I did have to significantly adjust my preparation to where I brought things that were less bulky so that I could invest more in speed to always outspeed Hoopa Unbound. And while that's a very effective strategy, it's also kind of risky in that he could bring things that hit very hard and still outspeed that speed tier that I'm trying to reach. and I won't be able to take those hits as well because I'm investing so much in speed. So that's kind of an issue with this team, especially when Hoopa Unbound, I believe, hits 284 max. That might be 285, something like that. So I'm going to be creeping that by 1 with a couple of my Pokemon, and Mega Charizard Y, for example, would be faster than that, so he'd be able to hit me very hard there, in addition to Excadrill, Heliolisk, etc. So those are things that become a threat because I have to prepare so heavily for Hoopa Unbound, as Hoopa Unbound is, quite frankly, a broken Pokemon. There's a reason it got banned from OU, and I fully support that, but it has coverage that can be super effective against my entire team, and quite frankly, I believe it has the potential to OHKO every single member of my team, depending on investment and move spread. So, or moveset rather. So, yeah, Hoopa Unbound, big threat. Other threats, Excadrill can be a threat, I suppose. I do have a Gliscor, but Banded Excadrill 2-hit KOs my entire team. I'm pretty sure on that, and Reuniclus as well is a pretty darn big threat, especially if I take a more offensive approach to this game. As one under a Trick Room, it's going to be able to do a ton of work to my entire team. The only thing I can really do to stop it would be to check it with Clefable or to beat it with a priority option, and even so, I don't believe any of my priority options are able to OHKO Reuniclus because it's so ridiculously fat. And Greninja, of course, can be a threat as well. Actually, one more note on Reuniclus. One set that could be very, very effective against my team is a, I believe, Iron Defense Calm Mind set, or Acid Armor, rather, Calm Mind set, as the double boosting option there, if I don't bring Underwear Clefable, actually beats my entire team. There's nothing I can do about it. The only way I could really stop that is if I brought something with Haze, like Tentacle with Haze, but Tentacle does not exactly appreciate taking the Psyshock following, trying to haze away Reuniclus' stat boost, so not exactly the most viable option in the world. So I am kind of forced to bring Underwear Clefable this week, even though I would obviously prefer not to. I guess I shouldn't say obviously, but I would prefer not to, just because he has Venusaur, he has Excadrill, he has Mega Charizard Y, all of which are pretty good switch-ins to Clefable, and doesn't really help me achieve any sweeping potential that I might want to with Clefable. So personally, I don't really like Clefable in the matchup, but it is necessary when he has Reuniclus that could run a defensive boosting set like that. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about his team. As far as my threats against his, Jirachi is not bad, as Jirachi really can't be OHKO'd by much as long as I run an appropriate resist berry. Granted, Excadrill can do a lot of work to it can OHKO the Jirachi, but if I run the Jirachi plus Gliscor, then I can just run an Aqua Berry on Jirachi and effectively neuter a Mega Charizard Y that tries to switch in on me, and just in general, he doesn't really have great Thunder Wave switch-ins on his team outside of Excadrill, Heliolisk, and Seismitoad, and while those are decent switch-ins to Jirachi, I do think that I can lure in a Mega Charizard Y pretty easily with it. And that's something I'll be doing here, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Other threats, Breloom, enormous threat against this team, especially if he does not bring Venusaur or Mega Charizard Y, but with the Focus Sash, I should be able to get 1 or 2 kills, if not more, with Breloom. And Talonflame is probably the biggest threat to him, actually, as he doesn't have any switch-ins to Talonflame. The only thing he can really do is run like a defensive Excadrill if he wants to be able to survive a Brave Bird or two. Honestly, nothing else on his team can survive 2 adamant Brave Birds, or banded Brave Birds from Talonflame, which is really astounding, but yeah, nothing can. So Talonflame is easily a win condition in this game. At the very least, it's going to be a wall breaker to the and coupling that with maybe a physical Mega Latios or a physical Lucario really can push him in a little bit in this game. So Wobbuffet also has some pretty good utility this game, although as you'll see here in a little bit, I decide not to build around Wobbuffet in this game. So let's go ahead and hop on over to the team builder. I've already alluded to a lot of what I'm decided to do to bring this game, but I'll go ahead and show you in more detail here in a sec. Alright, and here we are with the team that I have come up with, and like I mentioned before, he really doesn't have anything on his entire roster that can avoid being 2-hit KO'd by Talonflame's banded adamant Brave Bird, so I'd honestly be stupid not to bring that this week, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to be adamant with 244 EVs and speed, just enough to speed creep a non-choice Scarfed Heliolisk, as I would probably want to go for Flare Blitz if I was in against one of those, and if I was confident that it was not choice Scarfed. So this is probably the best set I could have possibly brought, and the rest just in defense. Really didn't matter where I put those, but Brave Bird, Flare Blitz, U-turn, kind of stock on a banded Talonflame, but then the last move was kind of up in the air for me. I decided to go with Aerial Ace as opposed to something like Overheat, as Aerial Ace is Talonflame's strongest flying or physical flying option that does not have a recoil associated with it, and I thought there was a chance that I would be in a situation where I couldn't afford to take the recoil, and in those situations, of course, I'd be clicking Aerial Ace, as it still is actually able to OHKO a good chunk of the stuff on his team, like Blaziken. It does a lot to Greninja. I believe it still OHKOs Excelgor, etc. So Aerial Ace was still a pretty good option. I did consider overheating that slot specifically for a defensive Excadrill if he decided to try to use that to check my Talonflame, but I decided that Brave Bird and Flare Blitz would be enough to deal with that Excadrill, so overheat really wasn't a great idea. Plus, it would just give him an opportunity to set up after I went for an overheat. So Aerial Ace was the best option. So that's going to be win con number 1 in this game. Now, win con number 2 in this game is Breloom, as on a Focus Sash, Swords Dance, Mach Punch, Bullet Seed, and Rock Tomb actually destroys his entire roster. He has nothing. He has potentially a defensive Venusaur. Defensive Venusaur is 2-hit KO'd by a +2 Rock Tomb, so if I were to go for the Swords Dance on the switch into a defensive Venusaur, then he'll take a Rock Tomb on the first turn, as he probably goes for a Sludge Bomb. I try to dodge the poison, and then I can just take it out with another Rock Tomb, as I will outspeed on the following turn, courtesy of Rock Tomb's speed drop associated with it. So honestly, Mega Venusaur isn't a switch in to Sash SD Breloom, and of course on a Sash I'm able to OHKO Mega Charizard Y with Rock Tomb as well, so he has nothing at all for this Pokemon, especially if I can keep hazards off the field, maintain my Focus Sash. There's absolutely no way he can prevent me from getting a kill, or 2, or multiple with this Breloom set. So Talonflame and Breloom are easily the 2 biggest win conditions in this game. So now from here, we're going to turn to, I guess, my defenses and to the initiators to the sweep of Talonflame and or Breloom. So first up is Clefable. As I mentioned before, Reuniclus is an enormous threat to my team. And if he were to bring the Acid Armor Calm Mindset, I would have to have a response to it. And if I don't bring Clefable, I don't have a response to it, flat out. I just cannot beat it unless I bring Unaware Clefable. So I am forced to bring Unaware Clefable simply because the Acid Armor Calm Mindset is so relevant right now, in that I believe, gosh, I can't remember who it was that ran it. I think it was Monotui that ran it in a recent PPL game, and I have a feeling Trev does watch his videos, so I have to keep in mind that it's fresh in Trev's mind, so I can't just ignore it and pass it off as an option that he will not bring against me. While I do kind of think that a Trick Room Life Orb set or a Life Orb Calm Mind set are more likely against my team, I do have to respect the defensive boosting set, and therefore I have to bring this Unaware Clefable. Now, the moveset here, Calm Mind, Moonblast, Thunderwave, and Moonlight, I really played around with that Thunderwave slot a lot in this game. I considered Psychic, I considered Psyshock, I considered Thunderbolt, I considered Flamethrower. All would be very good options as well, but I am most terrified out of anything on his team of Mega Charizard Y, so I had to have a good response to Mega Charizard Y. Thunderbolt is not going to be able to OHKO it even at +1 after a Calm Mind, so my best option was certainly to go for Thunderwave, as it is ridiculously risky for him to try to bring Blissey this game, and Blissey would be the only thing on his team that can be a cleric and get rid of a paralysis on something like Mega Charizard Y, so I figured that running Thunderwave on this was a very safe option, in addition to the fact that it would help me paralyze a Chlorophyll boosted Venusaur if he decided to use that as his Clefable check. Now, the only issue with this set is that I am hard-walled by Excadrill, and that Moonblast will not do much damage, probably like 20% on a good day, probably not even 20% honestly, to an Excadrill switch in, and then he can immediately threaten me out with Iron Head. And that's kind of an issue, but I do have the Gliscor, which I'll show in a little bit, that I can switch into Excadrill pretty much all day as long as it's not a choice banded Excadrill, and therefore I felt that this Clefable set was okay. I wasn't really required to run Flamethrower this week, whenever that would just leave me very vulnerable to Mega Charizard Y. Now, I am running a Kabaya Berry on it this week, as he has 2 Pokemon that are very versatile in both Torrent, Greninja, and Hoopa Unbound, both of which rely on Gunk Shot as being its coverage for fairies, so the Kabaya Berry, the Poison Resist Berry, was definitely the optimal item here this week, as with the Kabaya Berry, Greninja's Gunk Shot does really nothing to Clefable. I laugh at it, it does nothing, and I can just OHKO with a Moonblast. And the Gunk Shot from Hoopa Unbound, even banded, will barely do over 50%, and I'll be able to do a lot of work to it with a combination of Thunderwave and Moonblast. should that be the situation that arises. However, I do need to make sure Clefable is as healthy as possible to take on the Reuniclus, so I don't want to use the Kabaya Berry if I don't have to, but I will do it if it's going to end up being an OKO or a KO in Clef's favor. So that's kind of the thought with this. Kind of brought a standard EV spread this week, just the standard unaware wall set on the Showdown calc. And yeah, I really didn't need to do too much to alter it, just because it did take the necessary hits that it needed to take. One note here is that I'm running 22 IVs in speed, as this will allow me to outslow a Trick Room Hoopa Unbound, as a Trick Room Hoopa is probably the best set against my team. That or a Choice Scarf Hoopa. He has to have some way of getting around my speed tiers, as my team really has very solid speed tiers to deal with Hoopa Unbound, as two of my bulkiest things being Gliscor and Jirachi both are capable of outspeeding Hoopa, and the rest of my team has incredible priority options for it as well. So Hoopa's not exactly the best mod against my team because of my speed tiers, but that gives him the opening to run a Trick Room set, and therefore I need to have some sort of response to it outside of just my priority options, and Clefable here is capable of outslowing all Hoopas. This will outslow even a minus speed 0 IV Hoopa Unbound. So this will work out pretty nicely in that situation, and obviously I don't want to Thunderwave the Hoopa if it's a Trick Room set, so I have to keep that in mind as well. So that's the Clefable. Now, next up is Gliscor. Now this has a couple big roles in this game. First and foremost is to hardwall Excadrill to make sure that does not get out of hand. Now, Excadrill really isn't the biggest threat to my team unless Choice Banded, like I said before, but just having this around is going to deter it from really doing anything at all. And Gliscor is so naturally bulky that I'm going to be able to roost off any damage from. The only way that he can really beat this with Excadrill is if he gets stupidly lucky with Iron Head flinches, which we all know Trev is capable of, but we're going to pretend that he's not going to do that in this upcoming game, and we're going to hope that this will work out pretty well. Now, I am speed creeping Hoopa Unbound here as if it were Jolly or Timid Naive. Hoopa Unbound max speed at 285, this hits 286, so I'll be able to creep that, and I'm running a Yachi Berry just in case he wants to get a little cheeky with his Hoopa and run Hidden Power Ice on it, or even get cheeky with something like his Heliolisk or his Selgor. All those are possible carriers of Hidden Power Ice, and just having the Yachi Berry is good. I don't really think I need the Toxic Orb this week. While it would be nice, I do think that the Yachi Berry is more beneficial here. Plus, I'm somewhat expecting him to bring a defensive Excadrill this week, and those tend to carry Toxic, and that would be something that I would kind of anticipate here as well. And if I'm able to catch a Toxic in addition to having my Yachi Berry on this, that would be fantastic, as I'm still running Poison Heal this week. And yeah, so a secondary purpose of this is, as you can see, I'm running Taunt. Now, Taunt is going to be able to shut down Reuniclus. Reuniclus also can be a carrier of Hidden Power Ice, by the way. I did not mention that before, but having Taunt on this will prevent Reuniclus from setting up any Calm Minds in my face. It will prevent it from setting up any Acid Armors in my face. It'll also prevent the setup of Trick Room, which is very, very important, also against the Hoopa. But just being able to taunt his walls will definitely allow me to wear them down to the point where I can win with Talonflame and Braviarys. That's the whole game plan behind this team. Game plan is wear down his walls, don't let him gain any sort of momentum whatsoever, and try not to get hexed. That's how you beat Trev, and I am very confident in that approach to this game, and I think that it should be able to work out in my favor. But yeah, that's the Gliscor. Not really a whole lot more to say. Obviously, my bulk goes into defense so that I can take the Hyperspace Furies from the Hoopas and the Excadrill, as well as the Iron Head from Excadrill, as well as possible. So now is honestly the primary initiator for the Talonflame and the Breloom potential sweeps late game, and that is a Dragon Dance Mega Latios. Now, this is a set that I have brought exactly once this season, and it had a very different look to it. It was just the Dragon Claws and Headbutt set before. This time, I'm going all in. I'm going for Outrage as my Dragon offensive option on this. As after a Dragon Dance, Outrage easily 2-hit KOs all of his walls, and I think he's going to have one, maybe two defensive walls on his team. Probably just one. It probably just going to be like the Seismitoad or a defensive Excadrill, or potentially a defensive Venusaur. Those are his options for his defensive walls, and of course Reuniclus is an option for that as well, and this can break through Reuniclus too. But as I said, at a +1 Dragon Dance, I'm able to do a lot of work to whatever his primary defensive switch-in is. And if I'm able to weaken that primary defensive switch-in, that's one less switch-in he has for Talonflame. And the thing is, between this Pokemon going for Outrage against any of his defensive walls, and Talonflame brave birding things to no end. He's going to have nothing left for Breloom. That's the whole idea behind this. Triple physical offense. He has no answers, and I'm very, very excited to see how that does this week. Now, I am speed creeping the potential Timid or Jolly Mega Charizard Y. While I probably could have speed crept a Heliolisk, making me hit 349 speed, I didn't think that was a wise decision, as it was most likely that he would bring a Choice Scarfed Heliolisk, such as to outspeed my Talonflame, or also to, let's see, that would also outspeed my Raikou as well. What else? Sneasel as well, he would want to outpace with Heliolisk. So I expected a Choice Scarf Heliolisk this week if he were to bring it, and therefore I didn't really think it was necessary losing that extra bit of bulk just to speed grip a Heliolisk, which honestly isn't going to do a lot of damage to Megalodios anyways, especially because I plan to have a +1 Dragon Dance up while Megalodios is in. Now I do have Defog on this because I need Defog for sure to make sure that Breloom and Talonflame can do what they're supposed to do, and yeah, that's all I have to say on this. Megalodios is very, very strong against this team. Outrage and Earthquake just puts in a lot of work. Now we have the designated lead, the Jirachi. This is kind of a similar set to what I've run several times this season. This time the berry is the Aka Berry, as that is going to let me take any hit for Mega Charizard Y besides a +1 Dragon Dance boosted Flare Blitz. That'll still OHKO me, but everything else will not be able to OHKO this Jirachi, and I will be able to get off an easy T-Wave on Mega Charizard Y if he decides to bring it, and I also can get off a T-Wave on Elite Selgor if he decides to do that, and then proceed to either Iron Head or Stealth Rock or U-Turn, predicting to switch. So just overall, very good utility mon this week, and it's able to take hits from a lot of things on his team, and I'm at least expecting it to get up rocks. I definitely want to get up rocks if he brings Charizard, but just in general, having Stealth Rocks up ensures a lot of different KOs on his team. So, and of course, just having Thunder Wave and Iron Head will give me an extra option to take down Reuniclus if it becomes a little bit of an issue. So, I believe that's all I really have to say about my team. Obviously, I put a lot of work into this team, and I think this is probably the best I could have done as far as team building is concerned. For a while, I will mention that I had Lucario in the Clefable slot, and this was before I realized that the double defense boosting Reuniclus was such a huge threat to the team I had already constructed. It's a tough decision, as I was a fully physically offensive Life Orb Lucario with E-Speed in close combat. I know that's a very, very good set against this team. While it doesn't get many OHKOs, it definitely helps with the physical pressure that I'm trying to exert, and honestly, I'm still torn as to if I should bring Lucario or Clefable in that slot. I'm opting to go with Clefable just because of how relevant the defensive boosting Reuniclus is right now, and we're going to hope that's the right decision. But that's the team. I feel ready. I am pumped and excited for this match. It's my first time in the finals of the NPL, and this is easily the most challenging season the NPL has ever had in terms of the strength of competition. And yeah, so it's been a fun season, and we're going to try to end the season the right way. So thanks for watching, guys. Tomorrow will be the battle upload featuring Toronto Staraptors against Trev the King's Atlanta Braviarys, and I am really excited. I will see you guys there. Peace.